I'm about to drive 500 laps around the hardest track on the F1 game in time trial mode on a controller. The average Monaco Grand Prix lasts for 70 laps, and in this video I'm going to try and not lose my mind by driving the equivalent of 7 of these. When I did this challenge on F1 23, I only managed to get into the top 20% in the world, so on this game I'm going to try and reach the top 5%. Which, if you have ever driven around Monaco on a controller, you are going to be well aware of how hard this is going to be. So for this first lap we're going to go through it very quickly because it was a complete disaster. However, trust me, the progress that I make in this challenge is absolutely insane. As you can see, out of the 19 corners on this lap, I probably didn't even hit 5 apexes. Anyway, we're now going through the final corner, and if there was any positive to take from this first lap of 500, it was at least that I did not invalidate, and I crossed the finish line in the top 69% in the world. So if you are new to my channel, firstly, thank you for watching, and please subscribe because this challenge took an unbelievable amount of time to film. And just so you're aware, I record and drive these 500 laps in 10 50-lap stints. And in this first 50 laps, as you can see in the background, I made another 4 improvements, which put me exactly into the top 50% in the world. And once again, if you are new to my channel, this is absolutely fantastic, and I was slowly starting to think of my aim for the top 5% in the world was truly possible. Moving on, here is my 50th and final lap of this stint, and I was just so motivated to keep driving as this had gone very well, and from now on we're going to start breaking down these laps because I'm about to make some serious progress. So my first improvement between lap 50 and 100 came on lap 64, and we are going to go through the entirety of it just so you get an idea of how I was driving at this point compared to what I will be in 450 laps time. Coming into Massenet, I was already 1/10 of a second up, and even though I seem to be allergic to staying on the racing line through the rest of the first sector, we're now finishing this sector over 3/10 up. After this was Mirabeau and the hairpin, and going through these 2 corners I just could not stop making progress as I managed to gain another 2/10 of a second, which I maintained going through turn 7. After this was the exit of Portier into the tunnel, and I was now over 6/10 of a second positive to the delta. So as you can see, I managed to maintain this gain until the swimming pool section, but sadly I lost a 10.5 going through those 2 corners. However, I made up for it in Rascasse, but it was all about to fall apart. Unfortunately, going through the final corner, I oversteered into the wall on the exit of turn 19, which cost me a huge 3/10 of a second, which was very annoying, but in terms of the leaderboard, I still made 4% worth of progress, and I had 40 laps on this stint to make up for this mistake. And 12 laps later, I had a chance to do exactly that. Coming into turn 15 and 16, I was just about into the green, and I managed to improve going through these 2 corners. But unfortunately, I was just way too cautious going through Rascasse, so I knew that I just had to fully send it into the final turn. And to be honest, I did even more than fully send it, because leaving that corner, I almost spun again, but I made a very small improvement on this lap. However, I knew that I was on the edge of a huge lap where I could make a massive bit of progress. And on lap 86, it was looking like this could be the massive lap. Going through to back, I brought the delta to only a 10th of a second down, and I knew that through this final sector, there was a huge chunk of lap time to find. The first place for that was once again the all-important turn 15 and 16, which I found a 10th in, so I was now equal to the delta coming into Rascasse. And through these 2 corners, I really prioritised the exit, which brought me to 3/10 up, and I finally improved out of the final corner, and onto the main straight, I set a lap time that was 4/10 faster than my previous personal best. This was absolutely huge, as I was now into the top 41% in the world, but I desperately wanted to break the 40% mark by lap 100, which is exactly what I did, because as you can see here, on lap 96, I finished this stint with a 1.3 gain, and I scraped into the top 40% in the world, which I was absolutely buzzing with. Here is the 100th lap of this challenge, and honestly this could not have started much better. However, I was driving nowhere near the level that I'm going to be at in 400 laps time. It's now time for my 3rd stint, and my first bit of progress came on lap 21 as we're leaving the tunnel just over a 10th up. Coming into the chicane, I knew that there was time to find, and for the first time in this challenge, whilst I was on a lap that I made progress on, I absolutely nailed these 2 corners. Coming into Tabac, I was now half a second up, and I managed to maintain this gain all the way up until Rascasse, as I had a very similar run going through the 4 corners before the final 3 turns on this circuit. Unfortunately, I broke a little bit too late going into Rascasse, but I still managed to get good traction and rotation, which helped me stay over half a second in the green. And then out of the final corner, I made a marginal improvement, and I crossed the line with a lap time that put me into the top 30% in the world. This was absolutely massive for my progress in this challenge, because in just 1 lap, I had improved as much as I did in the entirety of the second stint. However, I was not finished on this stint just yet, because once again, we are coming into the final sector around about equal to my delta. Through to back, this time I actually actually gained a little bit of time by bouncing off of the barrier, and then going through turn 15 and 16, I absolutely nailed these two corners, and I was coming into turn 17 4.5 tenths up. And once again, I just broke way too late into Raskas, which was just so frustrating, and it cost me almost 2 tenths of a second. However, on this lap, I still made 3 tenths worth of progress, which put me into the top 25% in the world, which I was still very happy with. And here is lap 150 of this challenge. Honestly, at this point, I was just absolutely delighted because I knew there was at least 2 tenths of a second to find in one corner alone at Raskas, and I was so motivated to keep improving. So it actually took me a while to make my first improvement between laps 150 and 200. However, after a brilliant turn 1 on lap 183, I was an entire 10th up coming into Massenet. And after a very clean run going through Massenet and Casino, I remained over a 10th up, coming into arguably the most crucial section of corners in the middle sector. On my previous improvement, I must have just broken way too late into Mirabeau, because coming into the hairpin, I was now 3 tenths in the green. Going through the slowest corner on this track, I managed to remain 3 tenths up, and after a drift through turn 7 and a dodgy exit out of Portier, nothing had changed, which was a very positive start to this lap. Coming into the chicane, I did not think that there was that much time to find. However, I absolutely nailed these two corners, and on the exit, I was now 9 tenths up, which is just absolutely unbelievable. But I think that at this point in the lap, I started to get a bit nervous because, as you can see in the background, I just started losing so much lap time in every single corner until the entry to Raskas, where for once I actually took this corner correctly, which brought me to 6 tenths of a second up, which I managed to maintain through the final corner. And somehow, I had almost made up for my horrible run through the start of the middle sector, as I was now into the top 17% in the world, which is just ridiculous. This is because there was still 320 laps of this challenge to go. But sadly, I did not make another improvement in this stint because this lap was just so good. And to be honest, I was starting to worry that I was not going to continue making any progress on my next stints because of the rate that I'd been improving at so far. And unfortunately, I was pretty much spot on about this, but for way longer than I thought. Between laps 200 and 300, I did not make a single bit of progress, which was just so frustrating. However, I was revising for exams I had quite a lot during this period of time. So that is what I'm going to blame for my lack of progress, and as you can see in the background, it's basically a compilation of the errors that I made on these two stints. Along with the 250th and 300th lap of this challenge, my exams were now over and I was back into the right headspace to set some absolutely lightning fast lap times. And it didn't take me long at all to get up to speed, as on lap 322 I was starting the final sector 4.5 tenths down. However, I had an exceptional run going through turn 15 and 16, which I matched with a very good run through the penultimate corner to bring me just over a tenth of a second up. Through the final corner, sadly, I lost a little bit of this lap time. However, the main thing was that after almost 150 laps of this Monaco Grand Prix track, I had finally improved and I was planning on not stopping here. So as I mentioned on the previous lap, where I was 4.5 tenths down after a poor run through to back and the chicane, I knew that I could gain this time on lap 331. I was already almost 2 tenths up leaving the tunnel, and I knew that I had the potential to make even more progress. Through the chicane, I managed to keep it clean, and on the exit, I brought myself to 3 tenths up, and then going through to back, I had a fantastic run, which brought me to 6 tenths in the green. And luckily for me, I managed to maintain this gain all the way up until Raskas. However, because for me this corner is just impossible, I once again made a mistake, but this time on the exit where I just forgot to steer through the corner. Fortunately for me, I managed to finish this lap with a massive 4/10th gain, but considering I was only 1/10th off the top 10% in the world, I knew that I had to get there in the next 20 laps going through Raskas. Which is exactly what I did, because on lap 339, I was coming into this corner almost 2 tenths down. However, even though I clipped the wall on the entry to this corner, I still managed to make up for my previous mistake, and I gained 9/100ths of a second, and with 160 laps to go, I only needed to find 5% in terms of the leaderboard. And of course, here is my 350th lap of this challenge. I was just so glad that I was back in the right frame of mind to drive, and I was not planning on slowing down here. And after only 24 laps in this stint, I was warmed up and ready to dial in for what was going to be an absolutely massive lap. Going through turn 1, I cut the corner really well. However, a slight tap on the wall on the exit cost me 3/100ths of a second. But luckily for me, I managed to make up for this with an exceptional run going through Massenet and Casino corner. I finished this first sector being over 2 tenths in the green, and after this, going through Mirabeau the hairpin and turn 7, I maintained this game, but I was not finished improving just yet. On the entry to Portier, I took a wider line to try and prioritise a good exit, which worked out perfectly because as we speed up to the chicane through the tunnel, I was now almost 4 tenths up. To be honest, at the time, I actually thought that I was taking a pretty cautious line going through the chicane, but I must have been a bit lucky because I had fantastic traction leaving it, and into to back, I was 5.5 tenths up. Through to back, back, nothing changed, but going through turn 13, 14, 15 and 16, I lost around a tenth of a second. However, the lap was not over just yet. Going through Raskas, I brought the delta back to half a second in the green, and after a slightly poor run going through the final corner, I had just set a lap time that was almost 4/10 faster than my previous personal best. This was absolutely huge. I was now only 1% off my overall goal for this challenge, and I knew that there was time to find in the lap that I had just set. Here is my 400th lap of this challenge, and I was so motivated to set the magical lap that I needed in Monte Carlo with 100 laps left to go. However, it was all about to go very downhill for me. Between laps 400 and 450, to put it simply, I just bottled it. In the background, there are many examples of me just being comfortably up to the delta and throwing away massive chances to set the lap time that I needed. We're not going to go into this too much, however, here is the 450th lap of this challenge. I now had 50 laps to set the lap time that I needed, and the pressure was at an all-time high. So just before I started this final stint, I went and had a look at the leaderboard and did some maths to figure out exactly where in the world I needed to be to get into the top 5%. This was 5,117th, which was a lap set by Mike Lowry _95, and he had set a lap time that was exactly 0.129 seconds faster than me. I now knew what I had to do to get into the top 5%, and I knew that there was time to find. It was just a question of whether or not I actually had the nerve and ability to set what is going to be an unbelievable lap.
She was just a girl, she expected the world, but it flew away from her reach, and the bullets catching her teeth. Life goes on, it gets so heavy, the wheel breaks the butterfly, every tear a waterfall, in the night, the stormy night, she closed her eyes.
I had done it. On lap 483 of 500, I set a lap time that was actually good enough to put me into the top 4% in the world. For me, this is just insane. Compared to F1 23, where I only got into the top 20% in the world, I was just delighted with my progress. And honestly, I will be back on this track, on this game, to improve on this lap time for a very special video in the future. Here is my 500th lap of this amazing challenge, and thank you all so much for watching. Please subscribe because you are all aware of how long these videos take to make, and I will see you next week.